Much of Dr. Murray Bowen's work came from observing families, but he also thought and watched a lot of nature and thought about our evolution as a species. While he was observing different animals, he noticed that they have developed various forms of social organization and assumed that that was all based on their evolutionary history. Some species are characterized by solitary lifestyles where animals sort of operate independently, while in contrast, other species are very social, forming very intricate social groups and structures. The snow leopard is a great example. It's a large cat. I think it's based in the mountain areas of Central and South Asia. Beautiful, elusive, gorgeous beast, but they're very solitary animals. They prefer to live and hunt alone. They have very large territories which they mark with their scent to ward off other snow leopards. Interactions between individuals are rare, mostly limited to mating or a mother raising her cubs. So this solitary nature is a little bit due to the rugged terrain that they inhabit and the limited amount of food that's available for them. On the other end of the spectrum, African elephants are much more social. They are the largest animals on the planet. And actually, when you picture them in the wild, I bet you think of them in a group. So these are family groups led by an older female, the matriarch, and it consists of related females, I think, and their offspring. Elephants exhibit really complicated social behaviors, mourning their dead, playing, even displaying altruistic behaviors. They have really intricate social structures and really strong bonds, which are crucial for them to survive in the wild, especially when facing threats of lions and tigers or searching for water and food. So just as these animals exhibit patterns influenced by their evolutionary history, humans have also evolved with specific tendencies. Dr. Bowen observed that humans lean towards the highly social end of the spectrum, but we also exhibit individualistic behaviors. Our evolutionary history has ingrained in us the importance of social bonds, cooperation, and group dynamics, but we maintain an element of being an individual too. So he saw some of these more solitary forms of behavior as being a manifestation of individuality. Just like the snow leopard, we can and want to operate independently at times and rely on our own skills and instincts and follow our own needs and choices. But he saw humans mainly as being highly social, and individuals are part of a larger group or community. For the most part, our behaviors are actually influenced by the need of the group. There's an emphasis on cooperation, coordination, maintaining social bonds. We developed laws and cultures. All of this created a society which is aimed at keeping us together. Dr. Bowen underscored the idea that we have both forces of individuality and togetherness pulling at us, and they have each been crucial for the survival and success of our species. Most importantly, to this day, we still have within us, operating and pulling at us in completely opposite directions, these two forces. If you're interested in learning more about Murray Bowen, Differentiation of Self, check out the free course that I've got on mypeoplepatterns.com. It's all about differentiation of self, and it will go into this sort of stuff in a lot more detail. Totally free, mypeoplepatterns.com, and you'll see it there. But before we dive deeper into togetherness and individuality, let's consider how these dynamics evolve over a person's lifetime. Understanding how these forces manifest and change from infancy to adulthood give us some context to understand our current relationships with our partners and our family. So when we're born, we are entirely dependent on our caregivers. We literally need them for everything in order to survive. Dr. Bowen wondered actually if a baby didn't realize it was a self who is separate from his caregivers until they were a year or two old. Babies are hardwired to seek connection from their caregivers. They cry out for parents to soothe them. They know how to make eye contact from a really early age. They smile at us. They bat their eyes at us. They totally play us for our love and affection, and they need to because they need us, and we're okay with it. But think of how much togetherness there is in a baby and their parent. The parent and baby just want to mush up and never be separate again. That's all that force of togetherness. But as we get older, we realize that we're actually a unique and individual person, and we have power and agency, and we can do what we want. There's a force of individuality growing within us pretty quickly. So what do we start saying? No. The terrible twos and all the no's that you get and the head shaking is all about the first inklings of being an individual separate from your caregivers, and that drive to be an individual who is not part of mum and dad, who is not part of the caregivers and parents, and is an individual. This conflict of being an individual who is still connected to parents comes back around when we're teenagers. This time, though, there's more of a rebellion sometimes. So dyeing your hair blue, getting those piercings is all a way to try and claim some individuality, some pushback against the togetherness of needing your family, wanting to be an individual away from them. Just to make it really clear, the concept of individuality in family systems theory reflects on that force that inclines people to follow their own directives, to be independent, celebrate their uniqueness. It emphasizes our desire to explore and follow our characteristics that are unique to us, our thoughts and behaviors, especially the ones that distinguish us from the group and our family. An example of this would be a situation where two parents both work in medicine. Maybe dad's a GP and mum's a neurosurgeon, and their teenager has heard nothing but stories of surgeries and medical school and hospital stuff their entire life. There's probably an implicit or even an explicit expectation that they will become a doctor too. But what happens if that teenager decides to, become a singer-songwriter and live in a van and play gigs in Nashville? Well, it happens, right? That decision can be seen as an expression of individuality. That teenager is expressing a desire to follow their own passions and interests, and it goes against the expectations of the family and the community. Togetherness is about the idea of being wired for connection and being social. So togetherness is the counterpart to individuality. It represents that force that inclines us to respond to directives from others and be connected or live in harmony with the group or the family. It's about interconnectedness and interdependence of individuals within a group or a system. An example of this would be a family who has a rule in which every member gathers for weekly dinner. Regardless of their individual schedules or preferences, you have to be home for Sunday lunch. This is actually quite a lovely tradition, right? And it can be seen as an expression of togetherness, where members of the family prioritize the collective over their individual desires or commitments. The act of coming together fosters unity and belonging and reinforces all those family bonds. But there has to be balance between individuality and togetherness in any relationship system. An imbalance can lead to physical, emotional, and social dysfunctions. So if you've ever had to call home and tell your parents that you can't come home for the holidays and got a really big guilt trip over it, or the silent treatment for a few weeks, that might be a sign that there's an overemphasis on togetherness and there's a resistance to you having to be an individual. On the flip side, if your parents don't invite you to Thanksgiving ever and there's no one calling the family to get together, well, that might be a sign of a lack of togetherness and an emphasis on individuality. That could be quite lonely, that could be quite sad. So all kinds of feelings come up around that. Let's go back to our developmental visual for a moment. So what we're saying here is that no matter how old you are, there is going to be a pull towards togetherness that comes from your family, as well as a pull to be an individual as a unique adult. Differentiation, then, is partly about needing and wanting to differentiate away from our family of origin, as well as to become a self who can separate out their thoughts, feelings, self, and other. We want to differentiate from our family to be an individual, start our own families, or be a self away from them. But that pull is always there to go home, to varying degrees. And the way we navigate that is essential for our well-being. And again, when there's an imbalance in these two forces with our family of origin and ourself, we start noticing symptoms in the relationship. So Dr. Bowen's observations highlight the importance of recognizing and balancing these two forces. They're really connected with differentiation. And so it's about our personal well-being and also the well-being of all of our relationships. And when we understand that interplay between individuality and togetherness, these two powerful forces, we can navigate challenges in our relationships. We can understand that toddler who's saying no all the time when we're trying to navigate with our partners who's home to visit for the holidays. Like all of Bowen's ideas, they really help us understand what is going on in our relationship and can help us forge deeper relationships with ourselves to know what's going on in here, but also between people that you care about.